Prime Minister Mark Carney is continuing his globe-trotting search for trade and investment today. Right now, Mark Carney is headed to London, where he's expected to meet with the leaders of the United Kingdom, Spain, and Denmark. And this morning in Ottawa, the Prime Minister hosted his counterpart from Ireland.
This is one of our strongest relationships, culturally, economically, with respect to shared values in foreign policy.
The Irish Prime Minister said that Ireland will soon ratify CETA, Canada's trade deal with the European Union. And after that, Ireland will send a high-level trade delegation to Canada. So what future does Ireland see for trade with Canada?
Ireland just made a choice that should send shockwaves through Washington. Instead of standing shoulder to shoulder with the United States, Dublin has tilted its hand toward Canada, a quiet but brutal snub at a time when Trump's tariffs are already rattling global markets. Think about it. While America hikes tariffs across the board, 10% baseline, 145% on China, 15% ceiling on the EU, Canada is out there cutting deals, building alliances, and locking down trade partners that the US once took for granted. Ireland's ratification of its pact with Canada is more than symbolic. That's the beginning of a realignment, where America's former allies hedge their bets elsewhere. Washington may call it loyalty, but the rest of the world calls it survival. And survival means picking the side that's actually delivering stable trade, not tariffs. Stick with me, like, subscribe, and keep watching, because this is only the start of a much bigger shift. Trump's tariff machine was supposed to make America untouchable. The message was loud and clear. Rebuild at home, pay the price if you don't. A 10% baseline tariff slapped across nearly all imports. A crushing 145% hammer dropped on China, aiming to suffocate Beijing's exports into the US and for Europe. A 15% ceiling, sold as fair, but seen overseas as Washington drawing a line in the sand. In theory, this was leverage. In practice, it created an earthquake in trade relations that Washington didn't anticipate. Because tariffs don't just block, they redirect, and in this case, America's barriers became Canada's opportunity. Suddenly, partners once dependent on US access started looking north, realizing Ottawa was offering something Trump wasn't: predictability. Canada positioned itself as the counterweight, the place where rules were stable, and where businesses didn't have to worry about a presidential tweet turning into a tariff policy overnight. Nowhere is this more visible than in Canada's sudden embrace of Mexico. Mark Carney, Ottawa's power broker, flew to Mexico City to meet with Andrés Manuel López Obrador's successor. On the table, infrastructure, energy, and crime cooperation. This wasn't just about goodwill. It was insurance. With CUSMA, the Canada-US-Mexico agreement, coming up for its 2026 review, both Canada and Mexico know Trump's tariffs are bargaining chips. So instead of waiting to get squeezed, they're building a united front. Think pipelines, rail corridors, and joint crime-fighting measures, all wrapped in a package that says, if Washington tries to strong-arm us, we'll stand together. The symbolism is brutal. Washington once prided itself on being the indispensable power on the continent. Yet here we are in 2025, watching Canada and Mexico sketch out a playbook without inviting the US to the table. Carney's message is calculated. You can't isolate us if we strengthen each other first. And then comes Ireland stepping straight into the fold. While Trump is locking horns with the European Union, Ireland ratifies CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with Canada, and doubles down on a trade relationship already worth $2.7 billion. This isn't just paperwork, it's strategic positioning. Ireland, small but mighty as an EU member, effectively tells Washington, if you want to play tariff wars, fine, but we've got other options. Ottawa isn't only a trading partner, it's a gateway into a North American supply chain, without kneeling to Trump's tariff regime. The optics are powerful. Ireland frames it as protecting pharmaceuticals and agriculture from US tariffs, but make no mistake, it's a diplomatic signal. Washington thought tariffs would isolate rivals. Instead, it's isolating itself. And as Ireland prepares to hold a rotating EU presidency in the near future, that leverage isn't trivial. Imagine Brussels aligning its trade lens with Dublin's new Canadian tilt. Suddenly, it's not just one country drifting, it's the European Union giving Ottawa a megaphone. And what about Trump's promise that tariffs would bring jobs home? For every announcement of a factory expansion in Ohio, there's another headline of supply chains rerouted through Canada, or joint ventures forming with Mexico. The intent was to concentrate trade inside US borders. The result? Diffusion. Trade is spreading out, partners are hedging, and leverage is being diluted. Canada and Mexico together are no longer passive players. They're positioning themselves as a continental bloc, ready to resist tariff blackmail in 2026. Ireland's entry only strengthens their legitimacy. It's not just North America anymore. It's North America plus Europe, building bridges in the shadow of Trump's walls. The irony is sharp. Tariffs meant to enforce dominance are birthing alliances that directly undermine it. And while Washington boasts about punishing China or disciplining Europe, the continent closest to home is quietly rearranging itself without America at the center. And this is just part one. Because while Mexico and Ireland are pivoting, Carney is moving even further, reaching into Europe's heartland for energy, minerals, and defense deals. That's where the story deepens and where America's leverage truly begins to unravel. If Canada's deal-making with Mexico and Ireland looked like a warning shot, Carney's European tour was the cannon fire. His strategy was simple but devastating to Washington's influence. If Trump wants to wall off America with tariffs, Canada will turn that wall into a market for itself. And Carney didn't just settle for token gestures. He targeted Europe's pressure points: energy, minerals, and defense. First stop, London. The UK, still bruised by Brexit's economic hangover, is desperate for stable trade partners. Britain sees Canada as an English-speaking bridge into North American markets without directly crossing Washington's tariff minefield. Carney pitched Canadian LNG exports as a hedge against both Russian gas and US unpredictability. For London, that meant dual benefits: cheaper energy options and a way to thumb its nose at Trump's tariff tantrums. For Ottawa, it was a diplomatic win, proof Canada can carve its own lane in Europe. Then came Spain and Denmark, two countries whose strategic value often gets overlooked in US narratives. Spain controls vital shipping routes in the Mediterranean and is an emerging hub for green hydrogen. Denmark, small but influential, is a linchpin in the EU's Arctic and Baltic strategies. Carney's message to both: Canada isn't just about softwood lumber and maple syrup. We're a player in critical minerals and clean energy. By locking in preliminary agreements on mineral supply chains, Ottawa is tying European industries to Canadian resources instead of American exports subject to Trump's tariffs. This isn't random, it's structural. Minerals power batteries, LNG fuels industry. Defense partnerships give political cover. Carney is constructing an alternative trade web where Canada is indispensable and where US tariffs look less like leverage and more like self-isolation. The more Trump flexes, the more Canada and its partners harden their bonds. And Europe is more than willing. Remember Ireland's role? Its CETA ratification wasn't just bilateral. It opened a precedent. With Dublin's backing, other EU states can justify aligning closer with Canada without fearing they're defying Brussels. What Trump sees is punishing Europe for unfair trade. Europeans are spinning into an excuse to diversify away from US exposure. Tariffs meant to force loyalty are giving permission to defect. Back in North America, the ripple effects are immediate. Mexico and Canada's partnership is no longer just paperwork. It's practical preparation, shared infrastructure projects, crime-fighting initiatives, and cross-border energy investments give both countries bargaining chips when the CUSMA review hits in 2026. If Trump's team demands concessions, Canada and Mexico can stand shoulder to shoulder and say, "We have alternatives. We don't need you as much as you think." That's the irony Trump's camp doesn't want to admit. In their drive to make America the center of trade gravity, they've created centrifugal force, pushing partners outward. Instead of everyone orbiting Washington, they're linking to each other, leaving the US as the outlier. Look at pharmaceuticals. Trump's tariffs targeted the sector under the guise of protecting American drug manufacturing. Ireland, one of Europe's pharmaceutical giants, responded by aligning with Canada, securing a market foothold without bending to Washington. The US thought it could corner the industry. Instead, it encouraged a partnership that directly bypasses American gatekeeping. The strategic takeaway is brutal. Canada and Mexico are no longer simply reacting to US policy. They're preempting it. They're building safety nets before Washington can tighten the screws. When the negotiations hit, Trump won't be staring at two isolated partners. He'll be staring at a united bloc, reinforced by Europe, ready to flip his tariffs back on him. That's the strategic nightmare no one in Washington wants to acknowledge. But it's happening in real time. So what do we have here? A US tariff strategy meant to dominate global trade that's instead scattering America's leverage into the wind. Canada and Mexico aren't waiting to be pressured in 2026. They're already preparing a united front. And when Washington finally wakes up, it may find itself boxed in by the very walls it built. If you want more unfiltered analysis on these global shifts, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next chapter is coming fast.